Hey, what's up, viewers? I'm Josh with Bright Mediums, and welcome to the very first episode of Beginning iPhone Programming in Swift. For this and all subsequent tutorials, you'll need to have Xcode installed on your Mac, so if you don't have it yet, head on over to the App Store to install it for free. Here's what we're building today. It's a basic app with one button that toggles between a white and black background. Building this simple app will introduce you to a number of essential concepts like getting around Xcode, using storyboard, connecting elements from storyboard to code, logging and debugging using the console, and running the app in the simulator. Let's get started. Launch Xcode. I'm going to do it with Spotlight. And we'll create a new project. Single view app will do. Let's call it Learn by Doing. Make sure it's a Swift project. Find a place to stash it. In Xcode, we have a number of different panes. On the left here is our Navigator. This is how we get around the project, just very similar to the way we get around in Finder. In here, we have our files that were created by default. Applications have a number of view controllers. In this default application, view controller is the main one. Storyboard, this is where the user interface lives. We're going to build our application by adding elements here in storyboard, and we can connect them to the code. Okay, this area here is called our editor. It's where we do most of the work. Right-hand side is called the inspector. The inspector has a number of different panes that show up contextual to what you're doing here in the editor. We have an assistant editor, which can be another editor, or it can be what it sounds like, an assistant editor. So when you have the storyboard open, you can connect code to storyboard by having them available side by side. First thing I want to do is just load the application and make sure we can run it. So anytime that your code is in a runnable state, meaning it doesn't have any compile errors, you can select a simulator to run it on, or if your phone is connected, you can select your phone and then hit this button here. Okay, it's running, but you wouldn't know it because it's just an empty screen. Here is our view controller, and it says so up here. This default application names the view controller in sort of an inappropriate way, if you will. A view controller is a basic term for all view controllers. In your code, you really want to give things more context. So instead of calling this view controller, let's rename this to home view controller. You don't want to rename the file like this. That's not the best way. What you want to do is select the class name, either click and drag or just double click to highlight, then right click, refactor, rename, and you can choose a new name. We're going to choose home view controller. Great. You notice it renamed the file. It also renamed the association here in Xcode. So in storyboard, when I go into storyboard and I select the view controller, on this third tab in the inspector, this is what shows the class that corresponds to that, the view controller class that has been assigned to this screen. In this case, it's already picked up that we renamed it, so that's great. Now, we're building an app, not a widescreen, so let's add something here. Let's add a button. We use this filter down here to search for button, add a button to the screen. Let's zoom in and make it a little bigger. Let's give it a little styling. We'll make it a black button with white text, and we will give it a little more weight, and we will change the name to Matte Black Everything. When we click this button, we want it to turn everything black. But before we do that, let's just load the application and see if our progress is being registered. So I use the keyboard shortcut Command-S, Command-R, and sure enough, we get our Matte Black Everything button. It's a little too high to the top, so I'm going to drag it down a bit. In a future episode, we'll go over the best way to lay out your views using auto layout. You notice, for example, if I rotate this to horizontal, that doesn't look good at all. The way we solve that is with something called auto layout, but that's for another episode. Okay, that's not bad. Now, when we tap this button, it doesn't do anything. So let's fix that. I need the assistant editor open, and I need the view controller that corresponds to this view open. and it already is. If it were not, we could always find it by browsing through the code here. Now we want to tap, so when the user taps on this button, we want to add some code. The way we do that is we right-click on the button, and you'll see there are a number of events. A button has a bunch of different events that it can register for. In this case, we want what's called a touch-up inside. That is what you think of as a tap. When you think of a tap, the iPhone SDK calls that touch-up inside. It means that a user touched it and their finger went up while it was still inside the bounds of the button, as opposed to going down on the button, dragging away, and then letting go. That would effectively cancel the button press. So we'll use touch-up inside and just drag it into the code here, and you'll notice I can insert an action. Let go, and then name the action. We'll call it did tap. So the user tapped the button. Now when they tap it, we want to change the background to black. Now all view controllers have a view, so they can always be referenced with self.view. That'll give you the main view, in other words, the entire view of this screen here. All views have a background color, and we can use a little helper class called UI color. There's a helper method on the class called black. So we'll set that. Command S, Command R to run. And excellent, matte black everything. Okay, let's take a closer look at this function. Did tap, when we auto-completed this, it gave us this argument sender. Now, we don't need that right now, but sometimes it is useful to know what that does. Sender is going to provide the element that sent the method. So when we tap this button, the button element actually gets passed to this function for us. So just for fun, let's do this thing called printing. Well, it's really logging. Let's print out the sender just to see what it is. Now, when you print things to the console, they're going to end up down here. Here's the console. It looks empty right now because we haven't logged anything to it. Consoles allow us to log information to them, and it's a means of allowing us to debug and sort of get in some introspection into the state of what's going on. In this case, we're logging the string sender : space. This is how we pass a variable into a string. So it's going to replace this area here with whatever sender is. Let's just go ahead and run it and we can see. Command S, Command R. Now you notice the console popped up as soon as text was logged to it. We get sender and then this big long string. And this is the SDK's way of telling us what element it is. It's a UI button and it has all these other attributes. Its frame is this, etc., etc. So these sender arguments can be pretty useful. Let's say we had more than one button on the screen and they're both logging to, and they're both connected to the same function. We could look at the sender argument to see which button it was. So when we tap this again, it's still matte black. Let's add a toggle so that it toggles between black and white. In order to do that, we need to store a little bit of state. We need to know, is the state currently black or is the state currently white? Well, by default, we know it's white, so let's add a property. A property is exactly what it sounds like. A property is an attribute of an object or a thing. In our home view controller, we're going to have a property. All properties are really variables. A property that keeps track of, is it dark or is it light? And by default, it will be false, meaning it's light. This could work just the same if we did is light equals true. So is dark equals false, and then when it's set, we're going to set is dark equal to true. Well, that doesn't really allow us to toggle back and forth, so we first need to check the state before we do anything. Let's delete this sender, we're done with it. So we use an if statement. If self.isDark, then set the background to light, else set it to dark. So if it's dark, self.view.background color equals UI color.white, and self.isDark equals false. If light, set it to dark, and then set isDark equal to true. So if our background is dark, set the background to white and set isDark to false. If our background is light, set the background to black and isDark to true. Let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Matte black everything. Goes black, hit it again, goes white. Black, white. Let's change the text of this button while we're at it. In order to do that, we need a reference to the button. So let's right-click on our button, hit Referencing Outlets, and drag this over to our code up here by the variable, and call this main button. You notice this is also a variable. It also has this keyword IB outlet, which just means it can be attached to Interface Builder. Anytime you're in a storyboard file, you're in Interface Builder. That's what the IB is for. So we have a reference to that button, which means we can change its title. So when we change the background to white, let's set main button, the title, to matte black everything. You always need to set a control state. And a control state for a button, 9 times out of 10, you want UI control state normal, which just means when the button is sitting there being a button. In this case, when the button was light and we set it to dark, then we want to be able to set it back to white, so the button should say something more like matte black everything, make light again. That's it for episode 1. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.